Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name, and this is Ginny O Reads, the part of the channel where I read the first chapter of an independent science fiction or fantasy book. This week's selection is The Call of Chaos by Sean R. Frazier, a fantasy adventure. You can find Sean on Twitter at the Clepton Twain or at his website, seanrfrazier.com. If you'd like to follow along, you can find an excerpt of The Call of Chaos on Amazon. Link in the description below. From the back of the book. Exiled from his homeland, Krell Silvermoon was left to roam without direction. Bestowed with unimaginable power by the awakening threads, he struggles to understand his purpose. But when he discovers that terrible forces are tearing the realm asunder, Krell realizes that no one can withstand the storm alone. Forced to confront the mythical monsters that pillage the land, he faces a realm that has become much deadlier, encountering new friends, dangerous enemies, and impossible challenges. Can Krell and his friends discover the source of chaos and stop it? Or will they be forced to watch as everything they know and love is utterly destroyed, ushering in a new age of danger and discord? Let's get right into it. The Call of Chaos. The traveler experiences many wonders, most of which are completely foreign to him. Trust is a difficult thing to assure, especially when one is among the unknown. Trust in yourself, as I trust in myself, and you will find the answers you seek. Darien. Out and Beyond. Chapter 1. Krell Silvermoon sat alone at the table, staring down into his mug. He wasn't sure exactly what it was that he'd ordered, but after just one sip, he was sure that he did not like it. It was pale and fizzy, with a very bitter taste, almost sour. He thought it was something called Scorpion Hog Juice. Whatever it was, the rather hairy, barrel-chested man in line before him had ordered it, and rather than stammer with options he did not understand, Krell had decided it was best to order the same. He was well past the point of understanding that had been a mistake, but he had begun to realize that he had never really intended to drink it in the first place. This was about trying to blend in, a plan at which he felt he was spectacularly failing. It had started when he first entered the tavern, and was promptly knocked to the ground by a group of exiting patrons. After that, Krell felt as if all eyes were staring at him. Whether they actually were staring was a different story. He wasn't about to find out. He had the hood of his cloak pulled over his head and quietly kept to himself. You are just passing through, he thought, staring at the tiny, rising bubbles in the mug. The drink looked harmless enough, effervescent and tasty. He had hoped it would be similar to the mead he'd had back home. The drink's name should have been a clue. It smelled similar to razor beast urine. For a brief moment, Krell's thoughts wandered back to memories of his homeland. It felt as though he had been away for years already. But how long had it been? Sadly, he knew. He had meticulously kept track of the days, and today would be day 42. Not even 2 months since he was run out of his own village by those he had called his friends and family. And he still wasn't even sure why he had been forced to leave his village. He couldn't even explain exactly what had happened. Everyone's stories were completely outrageous, which is why he had not been expelled instantly. It was all very difficult to believe. But as time went on, everyone began to fear and hate him, and more unexplained situations came about. After that, it hadn't taken long for the elders to decide he should be exiled from Corinthus. Rather than wait until the end of the day and leave with supplies, Krell had thought it best to simply leave as quickly as possible. It had pained him to do so, but had been more painful to stay, knowing he was not wanted. Corinthus had always been a welcoming, tightly knit village where everyone knew one another, and it felt like family. Though he had been raised by his father, he had also essentially been raised by many others, especially Corinne Bailey. Mistress Bailey had been as close to her mother as he'd ever had, but when the time came, even she looked at him through angry eyes. It was as if he was now a stranger to her. Mistress Bailey ran the Seven Hallows Inn. To her, All of the children in the town were her children. Krell remembered many days spent playing hide and seek or catch the fox in the many rooms of the inn. Often, he and his friends would sneak a pie from the windowsill and gobble it up in the safety of a hiding place. Mistress Bailey swore she had no idea where those pies had disappeared to, but Krell suspected that was a lie. Unfortunately, it was also Mistress Bailey who had pulled him aside one night and convinced him to leave as quickly as possible. Krell fought back a tear welling up in his eye. He had thought a lot about home since he'd left, and it never got easier. There was still so much he didn't understand. His sadness was coupled with anger. He wanted to throw his mug across the room, to shatter it against a wall, and scream at the top of his lungs. He grabbed the mug, sloshing the smelly liquid across the table and dripping it onto the floor. The odor, mixed with the pungent pipe smoke, assaulted his nose again. Surprisingly, his anger changed to a quiet laughter as he scooted his chair around the table to avoid the noxious spill. This really is the foulest substance I think I've ever smelled, he thought. He half expected it to congeal into ooze and crawl onto the floor, which evoked more laughter. Without thinking, he instinctively took a swig from the mug, and, realizing what he'd done, nearly spat it out. But he caught himself and instead closed his eyes and quickly forced himself to swallow the concoction. The drink burned as it slid down his throat, causing him to gag. Krell was now unsure which was worse, the taste or the smell. This really is a disgusting drink. Why would anyone actually want this stuff? It's absolutely dreadful. He had been gripping the mug so tightly that it was a major endeavor to put it down and let it go. His hand ached a little as he flexed it, but he decided that the only harm that had been done was probably to his stomach. He gazed around the hazy taproom. It was nearly full of loud, boisterous individuals, many of whom had probably drunk too much. The stout man behind the bar, the same man who had served Krell, was busy cleaning and getting drinks to several different ladies. They quickly dispersed into the crowd, while balancing a seemingly impossible number of mugs on trays as they weaved about the room. So now what? You're on your own, the farthest from home you have ever been, with no friends or family. You are alone. It was true. He had never actually strayed from the forest of his homeland before. Corinthians seldom traveled, and why would they? Everything they needed was provided within the leafy canopies of the towering oaks and the sturdy maples. In fact, he couldn't recall of anyone he knew had ever left home. He never found this to be out of the ordinary. Trouble is bad, and the world out there is full of it, his father would always tell him. That was a common proverb back home. He heard it at least once a week, if not more often. Krell often wondered, though, how everyone knew so much about the outside world when none of them had actually ever ventured out into it. Many of them even professed to be experts. Sure, Corinthus had its share of visitors from the outside. His village always welcomed travelers with hospitality and wonder. They were allowed into the town and were provided a room at the inn. The majority of travelers stayed away, preferring to stick to the main road. Those who did venture into the Corinthian forest often were surprised at the warm welcome they received. Several of them said they had been told wild tales of dangerous creatures and mysterious disappearances. Absurd, all of it, but it was convenient, since Corinthians preferred not to attract too much attention. Story weavers and minstrels, however, those individuals were always welcomed within the boundaries of Corinthus. Krell, especially, enjoyed hearing their tales and music. Even if the stories they told were untrue, they were still fascinating. It was much more palatable to live out adventures through story rather than striking out on your own. Are you calling me a liar? Krell's thoughts were shattered when a giant of a man jumped out of his chair and slammed a large knife into the table where it stuck. His muscular arms looked like bundles of rope as he scowled at another man across the table, who, surprisingly, looked as if he couldn't care less. Silence fell upon the room as several people gasped, and everyone stared at the spectacle. Nobody moved, fearing something bad would happen if they did. The man across the table leaned back in his chair, legs on the table, and twirled his mustache between his finger and thumb. He had a huge grin on his face. Why no, good Sir Bork, he smirked. I am calling you a fat, ugly, bone-headed razor beast. Silence again befell the room with all eyes transfixed on the altercation. The big man, apparently named Bork, growled low and gritted his teeth. He then picked up his tankard, and putting it to his lips, drank deeply. Just checking, he laughed, slamming his drink down on the table, causing it to splash. He returned to his seat. Immediately the room filled with noise as if nothing had happened. Bork pulled the dagger out of the table and began picking his teeth with it. Krell recognized this man as the one who had been in front of him to get a drink. Apparently, he liked the swill they called scorpion hog juice. He also noticed the man at the bar discreetly put a crossbow down behind the counter and wipe his forehead with a towel. Krell got up, leaving his mug on the table, and approached the barkeep. What can I do for you, kind sir? The man began wiping down the counter with the now sweaty towel. He appeared to be trying to hide the fact that he was nervous, but was doing a poor job of it. Well, Krell wasn't sure what to call him, since he had never gotten his name. Everin Doyle, the barkeep replied, as if reading Krell's mind. But around Solbar, I'm known as a Falcon. You can call me either. It doesn't matter to me. Piss, I'll even answer to hey you sometimes. The man's face did somewhat resemble a bird. It was uncanny. He was stocky and stout. Krell wasn't sure if it was muscle or not, but were he a bird, he would never make it off the ground. His nose, however, that was where the resemblance was. It was almost comedic. His hair was thinning atop his head, and looked a bit like feathers with its texture and color. Or maybe it was just dirty. Did you enjoy your scorpion hog juice? Krell stammered. He wanted to be polite, but there was no way he could convincingly lie about it. The look on his face probably told the whole story. Ha! Everin replied with a grin. Don't feel bad, kid. Truth be told, I was a bit taken aback that you'd actually wanted it in the first place. Bork over there is the only one brave or stupid enough to touch that stuff. Everin leaned in a bit and whispered, Just between you and me, I use it to clean the grime off the oven in the back. Works wonders, it does. You really don't want to know what's in it. Krell laughed. That explained a lot. He would most certainly never try that horrible drink again. I think I will stick to wine next time. So, what is it I can do for you then? I think I'll be staying here tonight. Are there any rooms available? Sure are. Everyone cringed as the sound of shattering pottery rang out, followed by laughter. He quickly scanned the room, but seemingly unable to determine what had happened or where, he turned back to Krell. I've got plenty of rooms. Just one night? Yes, just tonight. Krell felt the hood of his cloak slipping a little. He quickly adjusted it, but tried to disguise that fact by scratching his head. After all, it was summer, and wearing his hood up constantly probably looked strange enough. I'm headed to Elston tomorrow. Elston, eh? Great city. King Alzin's seat of power, you know. Quite opulent. I hear he spared no expense when planning for the festival. Everyone began piling dirty dishes from the counter onto a cart. What festival would that be? Why, the Storm's End Festival, of course. It's going on all summer, and it's quite the spectacle, I've heard. Krell must have had quite the blank look on his face, because it only took a second for Everin to realize he did not understand. The Storm's End Festival is a massive celebration marking the defeat of the barbarian king 200 years ago. In fact, the barbarian king himself was killed at the very spot where Elston now stands. It is no coincidence that Elston is the seat of power for the realm. I just assumed that is why you were headed there. The festival. To be honest, I'm not really sure where I'm going, or why. You really don't seem to know much. Everyone scratched his head. Krell noticed something, probably dust, fall out in a tiny cloud. You don't get out much, do you? You could say that. Krell felt a bit timid even speaking to this man, but thus far he was really the closest thing Krell had to a friendly ear. I am from a place of great isolation, to the east of here, Corinthus. Everin's eyes widened. He stared for quite a while before shaking it off. As if he cared not, went back to tidying up behind the counter. So, Coranthin, huh? He wasn't whispering, but he was certainly quieter than he had been before. Don't think I've ever met a Coranthin before. You folks certainly keep to yourselves, but I'd always heard Cranthons were, well, barbarians. Of course, I've also heard stories that Caranthans were only a couple feet tall, and that some of them had eerie powers of some such nonsense. Powers like what, exactly? What? You've not heard any of the tales people tell? He scratched his face. A serving maid appeared behind the counter, pushing a small cart. She disappeared through a door, but not before giving Krell a strange look. Was she inspecting him, or scrutinizing him? It looked like she was more intrigued than anything. Maybe attracted? Krell had to admit that she was pleasing on the eyes. Maybe she thought the same of him. What? Oh yeah, powers like summoning spirits, or mind reading, or setting things on fire with a stare. Silly tales, I know, but when you've never actually seen a Corinthian in person, you sometimes believe anything is possible. Surely when you were a child, your parents told you that orcs would come and take you away in the middle of the night if you didn't say, eat your vegetables or keep your face clean. Set things on fire with a stare? For a minute, Krell had the urge to turn and quickly leave. A surge of emotions welled up within him, but he fought to push them back down into hiding. He had become good at this of late. Instead, he nervously laughed it off. Those tales do indeed sound rather silly, he replied, forcing laughter. Could you imagine? But no, we Corinthians are just like everyone else. From what I've heard, Outlanders often have misconceptions about us. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I know what an Outlander is. Everin had a confused look on his face. An outsider, Krell replied. Someone who does not live in Corinthus. So, then if you don't mind me asking, what are you doing out of your homeland? Tales be tales, but I do know that your people rarely, if ever, leave the boundaries of Corinthus. That much is true. When this man said it, it sounded different. Silly, maybe. Was it silly that nobody he knew had ever actually met an outsider? Who was the real Outlander? My people are suspicious of everyone and everything outside of Corinthus' borders. But it seems to have worked for us thus far. We experience no war, no strife, and everything we need we already have. I can't say that sounds half bad. But you miss out on, things like scorpion hog juice. Krell laughed again. It felt good. Oh, right, he continued. So you wanted a room for tonight. How about the Orc's den? It's on the 3rd floor. Has a great view, and stinks the least. After a short pause, Everin started laughing, apparently failing to appear serious. It sounds lovely. And only 8 coppers, he continued. I'm practically giving it away. Well, Krell responded, still not quite sure if the man was serious about the smell. With a promise like that, you might have to give it away. Everin laughed some more while Krell fished out 8 copper coins from its money pouch and put them on the counter, exchanging them for a key with the letters O.D. on it. There you are, friend. As I said, that room is on the 3rd floor. Head on up the stairs over there. He pointed across the taproom. Enjoy your stay here in Solbar. Thank you, sir. Krell nodded to Everin and turned to leave, but ran into a wall of muscle and hair. He staggered backwards into the counter as pain shot up his back. Something splashed onto the ground. Something foul-smelling. Get out of my way, runt! A rather deep, gravelly voice growled. Now, Bork, Everin replied. It was an accident. Calm down, and I'll get you another. I said move, kid. Bork reached out to grab him, but was too slow. Krell slid to his right and jumped away from the counter, putting a small, occupied table between him and the large man. All eyes fell on the two of them, and all conversation stopped. Even Bork's companions were transfixed. Everin continued to try to talk Bork down, but was making no progress. I apologize, sir. I was not aware you were behind me. Krell scanned the room, looking for an easy way out. He slipped the room key into a pocket in his breeches and nervously put his hand on the blade at his hip. Hopefully it would not come to that. Let me buy you a mug of scorpion hog. Shut up, kid. This shit stinks. Now you've gotten it all over my tunic. I'll be smelling it for weeks. Krell couldn't help but wonder why this man drank the pungent liquid if he knew it smelled so terrible. Maybe, if they ever had a chance to talk, he would ask him. He ducked just in time to avoid the mug, which shattered on the ground a mere few feet from him. Before Krell could react further, Bork had moved around the table and was almost upon him. Krell jumped backwards, putting a large wooden support pole between them. This man is quicker than he looks. I need to find a way out of here. Everyone still shouted at Bork, who ignored him. Hey, Bork! Bork's mustachioed companion seemed a little more concerned than before. Not now, Ulrich. I'm busy turning this kid into a dead kid. Bork took a swing at Krell, who deftly dodged behind the pillar. Bork's fist connected with the wood. Undaunted, and seemingly unfazed, he continued his advance. Krell kept the pillar between him and the man, still desperately looking for a way out until patrons nearby scattered to avoid the conflict. His heart was pounding inside his chest, but despite a shaking hand, he unbuckled his sword and kept his hand near it, just in case. The reality was, even if he could adequately fight this man, his sword would probably not be enough to stop him. Well, okay, big guy, Alaric continued. But honestly, it's a waste of time to beat up on a child, and not really a brave deed, but we all do what we must. For the good of the realm, you know. Krell gracefully backed up and rolled over the top of the table behind him, landing on the other side. Bork stopped his advance, his chest heaving with anger. He appeared to be considering his next move. Honestly, Bork, Alaric continued, it's a waste of time, and I doubt the city guard would take kindly to it. He sounded smug, as if he were taking this opportunity to not only try to resolve the situation, but also to poke fun at his companion. Krell stood on shaky legs. He hadn't noticed until now, but his sweaty hand had taken a firm grip on his sword and would not let go. The hulking man stood just a table's width away, snorting and grunting. His hands were balled into meaty fists that shook with rage, and sweat beaded up on his forehead. He looked at it as if he was lost in his own anger. Krell wouldn't be surprised if, when this was all over, Bork didn't even remember this encounter. That would be a fortunate happenstance as far as he was concerned. Krell slowly backed away, inching ever closer to the staircase across the room. He wasn't sure what he would do even if he mounted a successful escape. This man looked as though, if he really wanted to, he could knock down a door with just a couple of kicks. Hiding in his room would probably not provide much of a refuge. Krell could see Everin, who looked terrified. He had both hands under the counter, probably gripping his crossbow. The world stood still. Or so Krell thought. Nobody moved or made a sound. He wasn't even sure if anyone was breathing. Even Alaric, who earlier seemed relaxed and nonchalant, looked concerned. He was staring at Krell, slightly shaking his head and mouthing the word no. When he looked at Krell's hand on his sword, which was now halfway out of its scabbard. Shocked that he hadn't even noticed this fact, Krell slowly sheathed his blade. Alaric continued staring at him, but now he was ever so slightly nodding in approval. Krell went further and refastened the strap over the hilt. He put both hands up in front of him and continued backing away. Come on, big guy. Alaric got up and carefully put a hand on Bork's right shoulder. Let's sit back down and I'll buy you another round. Heck, I'll even pay to have your tunic cleaned. Also, just between you and me, it actually stunk before you spilled hog juice on it. I think it actually smells better now. This seemed to work. The transformation was drastic and sudden. Bork blinked his eyes, made his way back to the table with Alaric, and sat down. He resumed talking with his companion, paying no mind to Krell, who was still slowly backing up towards the stairs. Patrons resumed their clamor. It's okay, kid, Everin urged, visibly relieved. Go on upstairs. Looks like the fun is over for now. He still had one hand under the counter while the other cleaned the top. Just as with his sword, Krell didn't believe a crossbow bolt, even from a sizable crossbow like Everin's, would stop a man like Bork. It might not even slow him down. Thank you, Everin. I think I will retire for the night. I've had enough excitement. End chapter 1. Well, my lovelies, would you continue reading? Tell me in a comment below. Enjoyed this reading? Please give me a like, or hit that subscribe button, or share. As for this channel, I'm doing this on my own time with my own funds. I've set up a Ko-fi account, and any funds donated towards the coffee will be used towards buying more books to review. The link to my Ko-fi is in the description below. Every bit helps. Thank you. You can find me on Twitter at GinnyZero or at my website ginnysero.wordpress.com. That's Ginny, the number 0.wordpress.com. There you can find out information about all my upmarket fantasy and military urban science fantasy books, as well as review guidelines for this channel. If there's a book you want me to review, please leave me a comment with a link to the book, or contact me through my website. All suggestions welcome. Next time, I'll be reviewing Sean R. Frazier's The Call of Chaos to tell you what I thought of the book, if I liked it, and why. See you in the next video, my lovelies.